Hello, everybody, and welcome to another in our series of Arranger interviews. And I'm very proud to have with me in the virtual studio Mr. Dom Stichbury. Hi, Dom.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm okay. I'm good, thanks. Yeah.
Are you managing this madness?
Yes, I think I am. And I know everyone's having a very different experience, but I'm managing to do a bit of teaching online and keeping a few things afloat. So far, okay.
Good. Glad to hear that. We'll maybe come on to some details of that later on before we sign off, so we get a flavour of what you're doing now and what you're about to do later. I'm going to start off with the same question I ask everybody, and it stems from there. And the question is, as a child, what was your very first awareness of music as a thing and what it could, just what it was?
Well, I suppose the actual memory that I can think of is singing in assembly at primary school, which is an experience that most of us have had. Although I know singing is less so, but I went to a primary church school. I think I think we had an assembly multiple times a week, if not. I don't know if we sang every day, but it was very regular. And I remember that experience of being in a group and singing being completely a normal thing. Um, I'm pretty sure also because my mum used to take me to little classes where I'd dance around and things like that. I mean, my body, it was very quick to um, experience rhythm and pitch and stuff. So I'm sure that I had some early experiences as well, including my mum who played the piano a bit around the house. And an additional answer is my dad is a huge classical music fanatic, and he had a huge vinyl collection, so he was playing that kind of music around. So I think I just had a lot of that sort of going on, and luckily with the singing culture that I had at my school, that was another
Yeah. Okay.
treat.
Was there a particular song, even an assembly song at school, that you remember that hit you at the time? You think, oh, I like this. I don't know why I like this, but I like this.
Well, actually, the first one that comes to mind, because I was at a church school, although my family wasn't particularly religious, we had that new. I don't know what it's called, but the new hymn book with songs like "Cross over the road, my friend," yeah, da, da, da. All these kind of brilliant melodic hymns, which were great to sing as kids. And I remember, I mean, I'm a real melody fiend. I kind of can't and I still remember a lot of those melodies from those early hymns, and I'm sure that exposure to those, including doing a Joseph and his Technicolor Dreamcoat, just to sort of
Yeah.
learning some of the songs. And I remember at primary school us all singing together, sort of exposed to these wonderfully catchy melodies. So yes, there's
Yeah.
lots of those songs were a big part of my upbringing.
Yeah. Did you do When I Needed a Neighbor, Were You There?
Yes, when I needed a neighbor, were you there? I
That's
can't
right.
remember the
The reason like that, I think, is when I needed a neighbour, were you there? Were you there? I think the minor key gave it a kind of extra sort of importance in the, for me, it sort of said, oh, this is a really important, the words are important because it's a minor key. It's all serious.
It's so right, and actually, so many of them were in the major key. So when a minor key one came along,
Yes,
it did feel actually a bit
I
different, felt
think
like
so.
a gravitas about it.
I
Yeah,
know.
but those were quite formative, and I had a really, many of us who get into music, we can often remember our mentors and or unofficial mentors, and the music teacher at my primary school there, and I still remember her. Was great, and she was into group singing. She was into group activity, accessible to everyone, and that was sort of the petri dish from my early years, which kind of
Oh, that's good.
grew from.
One of the questions is, who inspired you the most in music. So if you maybe listed your primary school teacher as one of them, is there somebody else from at a very early age that, other than your parents, that inspired you musically, or you?
Well, I have to say that my teacher, Nicole Allison, who I'm still in touch with, who's actually was coming along to some of my online singing things. She's out there. Hello, Nicole. She might see this. She is someone at my secondary school. I was at a secondary school and we had a sixth form as well, and she taught me music through GCSE up to A level. And again, she was someone who was very much about group singing. She ran the choir, she ran ensembles, this kind of thing. And so her energy and enthusiasm was palpable,
Mm.
and her interest and range in music, and so I often talk about her as an inspiration. And she actually, there was a moment when I did A-level music when she was sort of encouraging me into some bits of leadership, taking a piece that I had arranged to the school choir, which it consisted of a few teachers and a few of the students. And I remember these experiences, early experiences of leading a group, and getting a real ego boost and a real high, and really enjoying this process of scribbling something down, arranging something, and then forming it and shaping it in the room with the sound. So she sort of allowed me, she inspired me, and her energy was amazing, and she allowed me to do some of those things basically.
Great. It sounds like good teaching, that she sort of saw that in you and sort of gave you the platform to give it a
Absolutely.
go.
And it's, I think often enthusiasm is infectious, when it's just coming through someone. And I think that's how a lot of um, uh, creative energies pass around. You're infected by someone's enthusiasm, and she came into the school with that. And so it wasn't just me, other friends who I'm peers who I'm still in touch with, are in music and doing things. So
Because of her. Brilliant. I loved it when you said your dad had a big vinyl collection. So classical. I think I had a similar experience there. So do you know if there's a piece that you remember that your dad used to play records, maybe Sunday lunchtime, and something regularly that you would listen to and think, oh, Dad, put that one on because I love that, or something you didn't like, or something? An early experience?
actually, yeah, I mean, he likes all the classics. He likes all the classics, like Vivaldi, Four Seasons. There was some classical um,
Yes.
sort of things. But then what was great is, as I was discovering more classical music, as I was being a teenager and at university, of course I'd then go back to him and say, oh, have you heard this piece? And what was brilliant is that he'd say, yeah, of course I know it. And he'd have the vinyl, or he'd have this or that, and so other thing, then later on I was discovering the Rachmaninoff piano concertos and things like that, and the melody, the emotion in that kind of romantic music was really inspiring. And it was lovely to be able to sort of share that with my dad a little bit, for him to acknowledge it. And then he'd come out with all the facts. Oh, that was in this brief encounter, I think it is.
Oh,
And
that's right.
that.
Yeah.
So
Black too. Slow movement.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so yeah, that was really good. And he once told me the story, in and amongst his classical music vinyl collection that he still has, there are a few sort of oddball choices, like I can't remember exactly the word, but sort of compilations of easy listening from the 60s, and
Yeah.
they're
Snap.
rock and roll and things like that. And there was some jazz records as well. There's a Cannonball Adderley record there. And I was like, where did you get this from? And he only told me this a couple of years ago, that Jethro Tull used to live like in the flat opposite or something, or she came,
Wow.
or I can't remember what it was, or shared, maybe rented he lived opposite them. And one day he just came up to the house and said, does anyone want these records that I'm throwing out? So he has a few of Jethro Tull's old record collection in amongst his. So anyway.
A great story. He never heard them rehearsing their rock flute. Well,
I don't think so, and I don't think, to be honest, my dad listened to many of those vinyls much, because he was quite much more into the classical idiom. So.
yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. Um, okay, so I love talking about people who inspire us. When you go to further education, maybe beyond school, you mentioned university or college or something. Who was there? Who was there that gave you that inspiration, impetus, or was it all now down to you now, and you sort of finding your own way?
Well, interestingly, because I had a bit of a gap after university, I didn't go into music straight away. And I mean, I studied music at Southampton University, and it was a brilliant, broad course,
Hmm.
like a lot of universities give. And I was able to sort of experiment with lots of different things. I think the thing that I was craving, this sense of communal music making that was maybe uncoupled a bit from the traditional training of which I'm really grateful to have had, and it's an amazing grounding. I was craving something a bit different, and I don't think at the time that there was anything there that sort of really satisfied that in me. And what I mean is that sort of sense of the ability for sort of music to just happen in the way that in community choirs and in these sort of more these spaces that can be a bit more spontaneous, and where you're not playing the repertoire that everyone's playing, and you're experimenting in a different way with music, with voices maybe, you know, or even in workshops through devising music, this kind of thing, which so much of my work has come on to do and my interests are. So I feel like at Southampton, actually, it didn't feel like there was quite that going on, but there were a few of the lecturers there that were quite inspiring. And I was lucky enough to be taught by Michael Finnessy, who's quite a well-known 20th century composer. And I mean, he's quite a formidable man. And we were sort of pretty wet behind the ears and didn't really, he was doing a basic sort of contemporary classical composition course. And we were sort of not really sure how to approach it. But the thing that I took from his classes more than anything, actually, outside of music, was just I learned about art, and in its broadest sense. And I learned about, you know, the almost the sort of he was able to quite eloquently talk about you know, the process of creation of the sort of meaning of art out there in culture and these kind of things. And I found that very inspiring, and it definitely helped me understand sort of music, you know, as in a context, in our wider sort of culture, what it means, where it comes from, its many different facets. So it's a bit of a fluffy answer, but I think later on in my music making, there were other people and other, you know, methods and organizations which I then sort of found led me on my way.
Okay. Well, that's cool. Let's leap over that gap then. How did you get from there to doing the community choir thing that you're so well known for? You know, the training and the arranging and the live experience of working with groups of anybody.
Well, I went out into the world and did a few jobs here and there that didn't really suit me, and it soon appeared after a few years of doing that I was, you know.
Would you like to name one of those cul-de-sacs?
Well, yeah, they were quite good cul-de-sacs. I was very lucky in a way. I worked actually in BBC radio drama
Oh
for a
wow.
couple of years, and there was a very interesting place to be. And there was a lot of creative activity happening. There was music making happening, composition. There was obviously drama and production, and I was very interested in also sonic production and you know, this kind of thing. And so there were quite a few threads running through there. And I also spent a little stint at Shepperton Studios, looking at leading on from the sort of sound production
Yeah.
side of things. And I worked on. I was a Pro Tools editor for a few years, which I can't believe. I was stuck in a room doing these sorts of things, but nothing felt right for me. I mean, I was interested, I suppose, in the general area, but what I had yet to discover was the mode of working for me. You know, how I wanted to work, you know, what work looked like, and what would sort of energize me. And obviously, I was sort of yet to find it. And what happened was, out of those jobs, I sort of those cul-de-sacs, I realized they were cul-de-sacs, and I was able to go part-time. I was very lucky in a job. I was sort of knew I was flailing a bit, and I saw an advert for a local someone who wanted to start a community choir in Kingston. I applied for it because I instinctively had remembered these experiences like I was describing in my A-level years and a couple at university, whereas being an MD, leading a group of singers, getting people inspired, teaching them songs and stuff. These sort of had percolated through a bit, and actually they pierced through my consciousness, and I was like, those are the things that I really enjoy. There was a real moment happening there, you know, and so I sort of just instinctively went back into it, but kind of quite not really knowing what was going to happen. So I applied for this what initially was a volunteer role for a new community choir. It very quickly became a paid role, and it was now as Euphonics, which has been going for about 11 years.
Right.
An amazing woman called Marilyn Mason, who's a sort of community organizer who started the whole thing, and that was the beginning of me leading choirs. And then as soon as I started that job, my training kicked in, you know, and I had done counterpoint, I'd done all these things at university and at A level and stuff, and I then sort of, you know, started
Reapplied it.
yeah, exactly, getting back into it. And actually my musicianship, I would say that, you know, despite training that I'd had before, my real awareness and competency, sort of deeper competency as a musician, actually I would say only really kicked in properly, you know, for me at that later stage, a seriousness about the craft of it, and wanting to sort of go a deeper a bit deeper into it.
Yeah. Oh, that's fascinating. You are obviously, you're very skilled in all areas and in mixed voices as well, but you're quite well known for your work simply with men's voices. How did that come about, and how do you want to develop that in the future?
Well, I think
Completely different questions.
yeah, no, it's great. I think that the first bit, how it came about, was really, I suppose, as you work a lot in community choir world as well, and you know that in the community choir world, first of all, men are underrepresented as leaders, generally.
Mm.
um, it's an interesting distinction, I think, between the choral, or the distinctions that maybe some people might not make, but um, in the community of choir leaders that I'm part of, at least there are fewer men, and particularly there are fewer men in the sort of first half of their life, which I'm rapidly moving out of. Um,
Oh,
and I, and
welcome to the new age.
thank you very much. And so when I was in my early 30s, when I was thinking about this, and there weren't many men like me in the choirs I was leading, and I was a very curious question for me, and I was sort of interested also in the wider implications of that, because we all have ideas as to why men might not turn up to sing, and I think they are complex and varied. But I sort of, first of all these things came together. I was like, well, hang on, there's not a choir that really, from a more sort of commercial angle, there's not a space where these potential men of this age might come and do some singing.
Mm.
And then there was also a slightly more urgent question for me about looking at sort of male mental health and thinking about, well, hang on, are men good at doing this? Can they come together and can they sing a
They
love song?
want to.
Sorry?
Do they want to?
Yeah, exactly. And is it just a folly and all this kind of stuff? So anyway, I was sort of asking all these questions, and I also was wanting to, create a project of my own. It was a moment in my career where I wanted to sort of put something in the ground, and a marker in the ground. So that's when I started Chaps Choir, and it kind of flowed from there a bit. And I think what the result, some of the answers to some of those questions were, yes, men really want to come together and do something. I think there's a lot of men who want to come together in a different guise than they're used to coming together, which I think personally is a slightly often a one-dimensional way, whereas singing together can bring sort of many other things than some of the other activities that men are used to gathering for. So those questions, some of those questions start to be answered, and as we've seen, and as there are many different flavors of male singing space that have cropped up, and I'd say they're still relatively niche outside of the male voice traditional choir.
Yeah.
The sort of alternative male singing groups and these weekends that have been set up, like Singing in the Shed, Bloke Fest,
Yeah.
which and these are wonderfully warm spaces for men to experience community together, in a way that I don't think we're so used to. And so there was sort of all these other things, as well as the music, as well as the repertoire choices, as well as that felt urgent and important for me.
Yeah. And it's worked, doesn't it? I mean, there's a new sound out there. There's anyone can sing anything, I love your song choices as well. Give us your most your weirdest song choice that you've arranged. What do you think? A sort of most obscure song.
Well, most of those are probably in the bottom drawer, and I haven't live day once. I think that with Chaps Choir, the idea was to try and find the place where repertoire intersects with something that is possibly unusual to see a group of men singing, or subverting, or something, And so I suppose, in terms of unusual, I mean, we do an a cappella version of a song by XTC. Hang on, wait, I just need to check. Is it XTC? Yes, it is XTC. All around the world, every boy and every girl needs the loving. It's not like a really well-known song, but we do an a cappella version of that.
Did they do Making Plans for Nigel?
I don't know their catalogue, but this is called The Loving, and it's
It sounds great. I recognise it vaguely, but
it's, I suppose that's an example of, it's not unique to what I've done, but it's an example when you take a contemporary or a song out of context, and as we know, using voices to voice a contemporary pop song can be very successful and can be very unsuccessful, and it has a lot to do with the quality of the arrangement, but also the song, the context it's sung in. So something like that is an example, I suppose, of chaps singing a song which you wouldn't expect necessarily a group of blokes to sing. It's an a cappella-y style arrangement, and it was some of those things that chaps started to sort of become a bit known for, which was unusual repertoire choices that you didn't see in the normal choir catalogue, which I know lots of my colleagues were always looking out, and you yourself, for things that aren't part of that slightly old world
Yeah.
choral catalogue that has an aliveness to it.
There should be a catalogue sort of category called "Not the Obvious," inverted commas, not the obvious choice. Okay, this is good. Can you tell us how you came across choir community and what it was that interested you about us?
Yes, well, we met a few years ago at Blokefest. We met at one of the men singing weekends, and I think we may have met before then. Actually, I can't remember, Craig, but we knew of each other on,
We did.
And then
Where either.
I know Claire Edwards also, who's young voices, and you're involved with that very much. So we sort of got to know each other a bit, and then um, I remember you speaking about how this canon of repertoire, um, which exists in the sort of a bit under the surface in the community choir world, it's gold dust for us as leaders.
Yeah.
Um,
I think you mentioned there's some things in the bottom drawers.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Stuff that we've done and put away because we don't know about how we can publish it. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think that, the thing I love about that kind of repertoire is that it's about the accessibility that it can bring to give people the opportunity to make music with good quality, arranging but relatively short, often shorter form than, the traditional choral stuff than we're used to. So, we were talking about that, and I remember that conversation. And then after a little while, I think Piers, you got in touch with me and said, choir community is happening and we're getting these arrangements out there. It took me a long time to get my papers in order and to submit something to you, but it felt like I'm excited, really excited about it, because it feels like one of the few places that is sort of offering this breadth of arrangements, to really give choir leaders the opportunity to do something a bit different. And I think I even hear and I see, choral leaders who lead more sort of traditional groups. Sometimes they just want something a bit simpler, and they want something a filler, or well, dare call it filler, but they want something, or even as a warm up, or they're looking for a more diverse set of songs to teach by ear, which is the sort of missing link, I think.
Yeah, well, hopefully, now you're on board. Hopefully, we can provide more of that. This is good. Thank you. I want to just ask you again. I don't know why I put this down, but I want to find out about your greatest musical experiences. They don't have to be choral, actually, but was there something looking back in your life where you had an amazing revelation of music, or you had an amazing experience doing something live with somebody, or can you think of anything you can pinpoint that
Yeah, I mean,
rises to the surface?
yeah, the sort of slightly earlier experiences of how sound, sort of moved me, or got, did something to my body, and I was like, well, it was definitely of a scale. And I know I did a lot of musical theatre as a teenager, and I love the old songbooks and the more recent musicals and the pop rock musicals and stuff. And I remember going to see. I remember watching West Side Story. West Side Story is one of my favorite musicals, and the experience of the sort of ensemble of that was incredible. I mean, I remember going to see live musicals, and as a cliche as it is, Les Miserables, going to see that as a young person, I think I was probably in my late teens, the power of the voices and the sound. I remember, almost physically sort of shaken by it. So those moments where you realize that something really is going on that you don't really understand consciously, but you're being moved physically. So I had quite a few of those early experiences where voices together in chorus, power, where sort of the power of it moved me greatly. And then, as I say, I sort of had a bit of a gap, but coming back, I've had some incredible performance experiences in, almost on the stage in a similar context. And one of the groups that I've been singing with for for about, I think about 7 or 8 years now, is London Vocal Project, which is run by Pete Churchill, who is an amazing composer, educator, and he's a lecturer at Royal Academy of Music in jazz composition. And he's a real inspiration to me and the other people in London Vocal Project. But he's sort of created platforms for us and put us on stage and got us to sing some amazing repertoire. And so, to answer your question, we did. I wasn't actually in the group, but we accompanied Bobby McFerrin when he did his tour about 10 years ago. And we were like the London choir, because they had choirs in different locations. And some of that repertoire off the Vocabularies album is a beast to sing.
Yeah,
But
I love that album.
yeah, it's yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm glad you know it. It's great. And so some of those bits of music, couple of years ago, we had a 10-year birthday gig for us, at King's Place, and that was, when you've really achieved something and you've learned that repertoire and you've got it in your bones and you delivered it, and it was great. And so I've been really lucky to have some of those ensemble experiences, which with my peers and colleagues and friends, that have been very powerful, moving.
Oh, wonderful! And thank you for making those experiences for others as well. Just before we sign off, a couple of things. Can you say something about your approach to arranging a song? Is there anything you can just pinpoint to say, well, when I arrange a song, I like to do this? Or is it different every time you approach a song?
I think the general principle that I'm narrowing down to more and more is simple, simple, simple. I know it's a very broad thing to say, but I've come from I think that realizing that I had an idea that, complexity was good, or a long time ago.
Yes.
And the more you teach and the more you involve people in song, novelty can be good, complexity can be good, in measure. But I think generally my approach is, how can I assuming you're arranging a song that is already in the canon of popular music and people know, how can you let the lyrics and the melody be center stage? How can people enjoy singing this? And usually the answer is, keep it simple, maybe add a bit of flair here, like a tiny bit. That's kind of how I'm sort of at the moment thinking about things.
That sounds good, and I resonate with that very much. I wish I wish I could do it successfully every time.
Yeah.
And now tell us about anything else you've got on the horizon. I think you might have one or two new projects which you're launching. Are you able to tell us about those?
Yeah. Well, I've been singing with Ben C. We're a male duo, and we've been sort of singing a few things in the folk kind of idiom, but we're sort of exploring other things. And we've got some Sunday workshops coming up. You might just miss this one this Sunday. We've got two more coming up at benanddom.com. And we've sort of been releasing videos, and we're going to be recording an EP as well. So,
oh, great!
We're excited about that.
Excellent. And so where the pandemic is keeping us online mostly at the moment. I think there's a few choirs that are braving masks and distancing and cleaning and all the other rules you have to abide by, and groups of 6, etc. How do you see that panning out in the next few months for you?
Well, I've been quite a late adopter to doing things in person. I have planned just 2 sessions with both of my regular choirs this term, just as an opportunity to be in the same space for an hour and do some singing. Just announced this morning is that London's going into tier 2 lockdown, so it might be that those can't happen. I've been quite risk averse. One of my choirs has quite a lot of older members, above 60. So for me, I'm mostly online. I'm doing some virtual choir projects. I'm avoiding a weekly Zoom because I have had a bit of Zoom fatigue. I think some of my choir, not all, have. So I'm sort of building a kind of structured term, but with a few different things in it, and a bit of a social here and a break there, that kind of thing. Yeah.
Good. Keep the variety going.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for talking to us today. Letting us know about how much some things that make you tick musically, and we wish you many, many successful years as arranger, MD, composer, and all the wonderful things that you do.
Thanks, Craig. Great to talk.
Cheers, and we'll see you around.
Yeah. Okay.
Take care, Dom.
Yeah. Cheers, Craig. Bye.